हेलो एवरीवन, जैसा कि हम सब लोग राउटलेज हिस्ट्री ऑफ लिटरेचर इन इंग्लिश पढ़ रहे हैं। ये बुक है हिस्ट्री ऑफ इंग्लिश लिटरेचर की। दिस इज़ बेनिफिशियल फॉर यू एंट्रेंस एग्ज़ाम। टुडे वी विल रीड पेज नंबर. Okay, page number is not seen here. So long poem. We will read long poem. Start there. बिकॉज हम लोगों ने यहीं पर छोड़ा था, तो ये सेकंड लेक्चर है, तो हम यहाँ से स्टार्ट करेंगे इसको। सेकंड रीडिंग है। आप सबको जैसा कि पता होगा, यहाँ पे हम बुक रीडिंग कर रहे हैं। राउटलेज हिस्ट्री ऑफ लिटरेचर इन इंग्लिश, हिस्ट्री ऑफ इंग्लिश लिटरेचर की। तो ये आपके इंटरेस्ट के लिए बेनिफिशियल है। हम इसको डेली पढ़ेंगे और सीरीज़ वाइज इसके लेक्चर मैंने प्लेलिस्ट में लगा दिए हैं, तो आप उनको देख लीजिएगा। अगर आपके पास बुक हो तो टेक्स्ट बुक पहले ये देखिए, फिर टेक्स्ट बुक पढ़िए, आपको समझ में अच्छा आएगा। और इस बुक की सारी जो सीरीज़ हैं वो एक प्लेलिस्ट में लगा दूँगी मैं, तो आप लोग उसको देख लेना ठीक से। हम रीडिंग स्टार्ट करते हैं। हम पढ़ेंगे लॉन्ग पोएम। यहाँ से हमने लास्ट छोड़ा था यहीं पे, तो हम लॉन्ग पोएम पढ़ेंगे अब। ओके। द रियूनियन डेट्स ऑफ द रिवाइजिंग ऑफ Beowulf, the best known long text in Old English. The best Old English is the epic poem Beowulf. Okay. Epic poem Beowulf. Beowulf himself is a classic hero who comes from afar. He has defeated the mortal enemy. He has defeated the mortal enemy uh, of the area, the monster Grendel, and has thus made the territory safe for its people and the setting, and has thus made the territory safe for its people. The people and the setting are both Germanic. The poem recalls a shared heroic past, somewhere in the general consequence of the audience who would hear it. It starts with the mention of a older day, looking back as many stories to the indefinite past, indefinite identif indefinite past, once upon a time, in which fact blend with fiction to make the tale, but the hero is a mortal man, an image of forwarding and doom. Prepare the way for a tragic outcome. He will be betrayed and civil war will follow. Construct between splendor and destruction, success and failure, honor and betrayal emerge in the story, which contains a great many of the elements of future literature. Power and the battle of achieve and hold on to power are a main theme of literature in every culture, as is the theme of transcend and morality. The language of Beowulf is extremely rich and inventive, full of imposing tone and rhythms. There are a great many near synonyms for warrior, many compound adjectives denoted hardness, many image of light, color, and blood, many superlatives and exaggeration to outline the heroic, legendary aspects of the tale. It is at the same time a poem was prized for valor and venturous died a tragedy, since the hero inevitably dies, and an elegy since it recalls heroic deeds and time now past Beowulf died at the moment of his greatest strength. Beowulf, dauntless priest, on to his tomb 50 years on from the killing of Grendel, but then has to face the newest threat, a second monster of dragon, the hideous foe in a horror of flame. But the poem looks to the future as well as power press to big Big Lev, the late, the kissman who fought at Beowulf's side, the old hero dies, long live the young hero. uh, अब यहाँ से पढ़ेंगे. That was the last fight Beowulf fought. That was the end of his work in the world. When the battles are lost and won, the world is for the young, and the next generation must take on the responsibilities of the warrior king. We all can be read in many ways as myth, as territorial history of the Baltic kingdoms, in which it is set as forward-looking resurgence. uh, Resurgence questions of history, time, and humanity are at the heart of it. It moves between past, present, and hope for the future, and shows its origins in oral tradition. It is full of human speech and sonorous images, and of the need to resolve and uh, bring to fruition a proper human order against the enemy, whatever it be, here symbolized by a monster and a dragon among literature's earliest outsider. Wolf spoke, the son of Icotru, my dear Lord Hygelac, many have heard of that famous grapples twixt gender and me, the bitter struggle and strife in the hall, where he formerly brought such ruin and wrong, such lasting sorrow for exiled men, all that I avenged with repeated concern for time past, time future, and time present. It is perhaps understandable that the date of composition of Beowulf cannot be accurately pinted down. Opens among opinions among critics and scholars vary from the 6th to the 11th century. Rec- Recent scholars have challenged the general opinion that it dates from the middle of the 18th century, around the year 750, making it as much as 300 years later. This is an area of history where there is much controversy and debate, and no consensus. Before is the beginning of a heroic tradition emphasizing strength and the territorial imp- imperative. But Beowulf is also in a way a text that comes close to its listener when performed in the hall of a castle using spoken language world which everyone can understand and remember. The structure of Wolf involve a main plot featuring animal and monster, with only the subplot involving human being. The two narratives are interlinked with conflict between the two groups and even a sermon on human behavior. We all suggested what a hero is and how important the hero is as a focus of public attention and admiration. For he was of all men the worthiest warrior in all the earth, while he still might rule and wield the wealth of his lordly land. Wolf was always attract readers, and perhaps never more than in the 1990s, when at least two major poets, the Scott, Edwin Morgan, and the Irishman Seamus Heaney retranslated into modern English. Heaney's version became a worldwide bestseller and won many awards, taking one of the earliest texts of English literature to a vast new audience. Bold in battle, fighter few, weary with wounds that convert earth. The Battle of Malden. By way of construct another text whose subject is war, the Battle of Medal, the Battle of Malden is less fanciful. It is again a poem, but more a documentary of the battle than a glorification of warlike values. It recounts a defeat, stressing bloodshed and lose commor- commemorating a battle in the year 991 as against most of the texts of the time. The Battle of Meldon may have been written down fairly close to the time of the event is described, and this may contribute to its more factual, less fictional tone. This can be read as a rather more realistic depiction of the necessity of victory and therefore the need for a hero. However, again there is an ongoing debate about whether the Battle of Meldon is to be seen as a more distant work of literature than a more or less contemporary semi-documentary account with the celebration of honor, fidelity, and bravery in the face of defeat. Like all Old English verse, the Battle of Meldon used the dividing line to create the rhythm, the sound of battle. And lines. Then fighting were near honor in battle. The hour was come. Men must fall, a dying arouse. Raven and eagle were eager for carnage. There was uproar on earth. Perhaps we all in having three generations of mythical monster as a principal enemy. General's mother, General's mother, Angelus, and the son is more suited to the myth-making hero is extols. It is fascinating, however, that two such different approaches to war, which is a constant theme in literature, should emerge at almost the same time in a world which was consistently at war. We do not know who the author of Beowulf and the Battle of Maldon were, but the texts clearly show differently authorial points of view. When an anonymous text almost always has something of an author's personality in the although text in the oral tradition probably underwent many changes at the hands of individual scopes or words. The concept of an author, the single creative person who gives the text authority, only comes later in the period. Most Old English poetry is anonymous, even though names which are in no way comparable, such as Caedmon or Dior, are used to identify single text. Caedmon and Dior might indeed be as mythical as Gendel might be the originator of the text, which were their names, or in Dior's cases only the personas whose first person voice narrate the poem. Only Snevolf signed this work, anticipating the role of the author by some 400 years. Alfred, the great king of the West Saxon, at the end of 9th century, was known as a translator of Cura pastoralized Pastoralize a guide to living and spiritual education. Alfred launched a significant program of translation into a vernacular and had a major impact on the shift from Latin to English as a language of learning. He commissioned several more translations of history, geography, and even academics him into West Saxon, which became the dominant language in the 10th and 11th century. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle began in the last decade of his reign, was probably inspired, if not partly written by him. Alfred's influence on translation into idiomatic, accessible language took England ahead of the rest of Europe in beginning a tradition of language and literacy in the vernacular, which in many ways marks the beginning of the long tradition of literature in English. And next heading is in French influence and English affirmation. The world of Old English literature is a world of warrior and battle, a world where the individual, if not under the protection of his local lord, is a solitary outsider in a harsh and difficult society. The world was to change slowly but radically as a result of the most famous single event in English history, the Norman Conquest of 1066. The Normans, originally Northmen, across the channel from French, won the Battle of Hastings and took over the Kingdom of England, which legitimately belonged to the family of the new King William the Conqueror. The Normans brought with them the French language and culture. The 2 centuries after the conquest were a period of consolidation as the two languages struggled to integrate. Bilingualism was widespread, with French being widely read and written in England from the 12th century to the late 14th century. It was, however, only after 1204, when King John loses of French lands lead the aristocracy to up for England or France, that the Norman conquerors themselves began to develop a peculiar English identity and a desire to use the English language. Subsequently, more and more French were entered the English language. Lay literacy development widely at this time, and books were commercially produced as English established itself as the language of writing for a growing readership who bought and lent books. At this time, London established itself as the capital city. The characteristics of the dialect came to the recognized as the London dialect, show that its main influence came from the north, for the university cities of course, and Cambridge, and from the um, Midlands rather than from the south. It now began its rise to prominence as the dominant spoken English, although local dialects remain throughout the land and are found again and again in the literature of the next 150 years. Anglo-Latin was different from Paris Latin, and Chancery English developed away from French in many ways. French was finally rejected only in 1415, when King Henry the Fifth affirmed English domination, terri- territorial and linguistic, over what had by then become the nation's oldest enemy. Lantern is come with love to town, spring, century 1330. The idea of the author comes into English literature significantly with Lalemon in the early 13th century. She wrote Brut, the first national epic in English, taking material from many sources and recounting tales of the Dark Age. The 2nd century, between the departure of the Romans at the beginning of the 50th century and the first track of the culture of the Britons, Brutonus, he takes the story up to the arrival of Saint Augustine, the first archbishop of Canterbury in 597, telling the story of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, which will feature time and again in English literature as a mixture of history, legend, myth, and magic. Lymon's immediate source was a 12th century work by Bobs written in French from Celtic source based on a history of Geoffrey and Monmouth. This takes the fun. This trace the fun. Fun. This take the foundation of Britain back of Brutus, great gardeners, great grandson of Aeneas, hero of Brazil's Latin epic. The Aeneid and hero of the Trojan wars described in the Greek epic of Homer, in particular the Iliad. This search for classical, not Christian roots is interesting as it shows a wish for historical continuity, for heroic antecedent, and for an element of political myths making. There had been earlier versions of the history of the country, but this was a conscious attempt to emulate classic epic. There will be many more national epics throughout the centuries as authors go back in history in order to uh, reinterpret the reinterpret the past in relation to the present. Often these epic are manifestation uh, of a time of crisis and tradition, transition in terms of national identity. Lemons is a case in point. He in his own word put the book together as England was seeking to establish its Englishness, observing the immensely formatting French influence which had come in with the Norman conquest, but subordinating them to the dominant English culture. Among the French influence in literary terms was a new subject for minstrel singers and poets. The warrior hero began to settle down his territories, now rather more secure, and to think of other things. He hewed up his sword, took up a musical instrument, and began to sing of love. Until the northern conquest, there is hardly any love poetry in English literature. Clearly, land was more important than love. However, old English poems such as the Wife's Lament, and Wolf and Adversar would be said to belong to the Dakshan. Very probably some of the lost work of Old English will have been love poems. The new love theme comes from Provence in the southeast of France, where poets known as troubadours gave voice to the concept of courtly love. The term was only coined several centuries later. Love was an almost religious passion, and the greatest love of fulfilled. This is the beginning of the concept of ideal love. Just cast but passionate, which will give rise to a huge amount and variety of lyric poetry over the centuries. Very often the focus of love takes on a religious note. It is no coincidence that worship of the Virgin Mary began to spread in the 12th century in Europe. This example date from the 15th century. I sing of a maiden that is Michael's as due in April, that fettled on the spray. Mother and maiden was never none but she. Be I May, such a lady, goddess, Modervi, Modervi at almost the same time around uh, 1100. The good soldier was beginning to go off on the holy crus- crusades all the way across Europe to the Christian holy cities of Jerusalem, while the menfolk went on crusades. Women were expected to wait at home, embodying patience, beauty, and ideal virtues. Like many of the roots of British history, the concept has classical origins. Pen- Penelope, or the wife of Oasis in Humos, the Oasis waited 20 years, were, we are told, rejecting all suitors in the meantime. The romantic notion of fidelity, fidelity with the feminine imagery, such as the rose from Le Roman de la Rose. Le Roman de la Rose, the romantic of the rose, possibly the most influential, important text of the early Middle English period, established a code of behavior, set a value on chastity, castity, and order a subordinate role of for women. The rose symbolizes and the lady's love. The god of love is seen inside a walled garden with the harsh realities of life and the masculine world outside. From this image, a whole allegorical and philosophical concept of love developed, although it would be mistaken to see lay Roman as a treatise on caste. Caste love. It is full of sexuality, a multifaceted examination of a nature of love in all its forms, from the idealized to the earthy. The work had two authors and gave rise to the question of the rose in a controversy about its intention. It ranges from misogyny to worship of the beloved, from immorality and chastity. So, as castity, so these contrasting philosophies have made the text both ambiguous and controversial. However, it is perhaps best seen as conversing a great range, albeit from a male point of view, and starting off a wide-ranging new tradition of love like literature, which can be both pure and earthly. The love literature of the next few centuries will do its best to uphold this new tradition despite frequent temptations to bring love to a more realistic and earthly expression. It is interesting that the two standards of war literature and religious literature united to foster this new theme. Love is thus romanticized instead of being allowed to become dangerous on anarchy and subvert the order of things. It has its own impulse, symbols, and patterns, but largely without the realistic element of daily life. Realism, realism we will find often has to be kept down if literature is to affirm the accept dominate values of its time. As we have seen, French culture and language interested with native English culture for several generations after the Norman conquest. A common word such as castle is a French loan word, for example, and the whole Romance tradition comes from the French, but this sensibility, culture, and language become integrated with native culture, as well as the beginning of what come to be called a courtly love tradition. We can find in early Middle English around the time that Lemons was writing brewed the growth of a local tradition of songs and ballad. The song lyric might celebrate the changing of the seasons, like lantern in come with love to town. From spring it might praise the glorious of nature. It might even sing of love in a more direct way than the courtly poem. Summer is ice cumin in welcoming the arrival of summer is one of the first such song and is usually dated around 1250. Summer is I cumin in Liu Sing Cuckoo. Growth seeds and bloweth mid and springed the wood new. The ballad traditionally told a story based on a character like Robin Hood, unfortunate Lord Randall, or the wife of Usur's well. In memorable rhythmic verse, the ending was generally unhappy in contrast with the simple positive arrestation of the song lyric. The ballad Lord Randall is a question answer dialogue ending in this death. What did it leave to your true love, Lord Renal, my son? What did it leave to your true love, my handsome young man? I leave her hell and fire, mother, make my bed soon, for I am sick at the heart and fain wed lie down. It is difficult to put dates to most ballads since they were collected for publication countries after they first appeared in the oral tradition. Some scholars date the earliest ballad to the 13th century, other tracks them back to the 15th century. Whatever the case, this is the beginning of a popular tradition of song, story, and ballad which will run through every century. It is sometimes quite close in style and subject matter to the more literacy writing, but is often a quite separate distance and more understanding voice of popular distance and dissatisfaction. Language and dialogue. Today we stop here, and next day we will read language and dialect. So till then, bye bye, take care, and subscribe to my channel, hit the bell icon. Please like the video, share the video. Thank you. Happy reading.